I want you to do something for me before this video even gets started. Go to your kitchen right now or just picture it in your mind. Open your spice cabinet. Look at what's in there. Cinnamon, garlic powder, turmeric, maybe some cayenne, some cardamom, a little ginger. Bottles you've had for years. Probably spices you reach for when you want to add flavor to your food. When you want your meal to taste like something instead of nothing. Now, I want you to consider something that most physicians have never taken the time to sit down and explain to you. Every single one of those bottles contains compounds that act directly on your glucose metabolism. Compounds that your body responds to the way it responds to certain medications. Compounds that in clinical research involving real patients with real type 2 diabetes or prediabetes have produced reductions in fasting blood sugar and improvements in long-term control that rival what some commonly prescribed approaches can achieve in mild cases. And yet, there is a very good chance that nobody in your medical team has ever mentioned a word of this to you. That changes today. My name is Dr. Sandra. I am a cardiologist and I have been practicing cardiovascular medicine for over 23 years. In that time, I have watched thousands of patients manage blood sugar with varying degrees of success. What I have found consistently across decades of patient care is that the gap between what the research actually shows and what patients are actually told is sometimes staggering. And nowhere is that gap wider than in the conversation about food spices and how powerfully they can influence glucose control. Before we go any further, if this channel is new to you, please take 2 seconds and hit that subscribe button. Your health needs what you're going to learn here today. Today, I am going to walk you through 7 specific spices sitting in kitchens all across America right now that clinical research has connected to meaningful, measurable improvements in blood sugar. I'll explain exactly how each one works inside your body. I'll share stories from real patients, people over 60 just like you, whose numbers changed in ways that surprised even me. And I'll give you practical, honest guidance on how to actually use these spices in your daily life. This is not about replacing your medications. That is a conversation you have with your doctor. But this is absolutely about understanding what is available to you right now in your own kitchen for pennies that the pharmaceutical conversation has a habit of leaving out. Let's begin. Spice 1, cinnamon. Let's start with the most extensively studied spice for blood sugar in the entire metabolic literature. The Snorts one with the most human clinical trials behind it, the most consistent research findings, and arguably the most impressive numbers for everyday use. Cinnamon. I know you've heard about cinnamon your whole life. Your grandmother told you cinnamon was good for you, and you may have dismissed it as folk medicine, the kind of thing people believed before we had real science. I'm here to tell you that in this particular case, your grandmother was more right than she knew. And the science backs her up completely. Here is what is happening inside your body when you consume cinnamon. Cinnamon contains a compound called cinnamaldehyde, which is responsible for its characteristic flavor and its powerful metabolic effects. Cinnamaldehyde acts like a natural insulin sensitizer. It helps your cells respond better to the insulin your pancreas already produces. So glucose can enter the cells more easily instead of staying in the bloodstream. But cinnamaldehyde doesn't stop there. Research has also shown that compounds from cinnamon can slow the breakdown of carbohydrates in the digestive tract and support healthier glucose uptake after meals. The two mechanisms work together simultaneously, which is why the research on cinnamon is so impressively consistent. A review of multiple clinical studies involving hundreds of people with type 2 diabetes found that consistent cinnamon consumption produced an average reduction in fasting blood sugar of around 15 to 25 mg/dL and improvements in HbA1c of about 0.3 to 0.6%. That is clinically meaningful. To put it in context, that is comparable to what some lifestyle interventions or low-doses adjunct approaches can achieve from a spice that costs less than $1 a jar at any grocery store in America. Let me tell you about Raymond. Raymond was 64 years old. He was a retired firefighter from Nashville, Tennessee, 31 years on the job. He was the kind of man who had spent his entire career running towards situations that most people run away from, and he approached his health with the same stoic determination, meaning he didn't like talking about it much and he didn't like taking pills. When Raymond came to see me, his fasting blood sugar was running in the 160-170 range and his HbA1c was 8.2. He was on one medication that he took inconsistently because it sometimes left him feeling off. His wife had been after him to come in for 2 years. He finally came in. He sat down across from me and the first thing he said was, "Is there anything that actually works that isn't a pill?" I told Raymond about cinnamon, not capsules or extracts, but real cinnamon added to his cooking daily. 1/2 to 1 teaspoon of Ceylon cinnamon stirred into his meals. Cooked was fine. Raymond grew up in Tennessee. He cooked. He knew how to use cinnamon in his kitchen. This was not a foreign concept to him. It was something he was already doing occasionally. We just made it consistent and intentional. 6 weeks later, Raymond's fasting blood sugar was averaging 142, and his HbA1c had dropped noticeably. We hadn't adjusted his medication. His doctor was honestly a little skeptical until he saw it with his own eyes. From making one deliberate dietary addition consistent, Raymond called my office to tell me this. He said, "I feel like myself again." That is the sentence I remember most from that conversation. Spice 2, ginger. The second spice on this list shares something fascinating in common with cinnamon. It also works through more than one blood sugar pathway simultaneously. Ginger. The active compounds in fresh and dried ginger substances called ginger rolls, shoggols, and zingerone work on your glucose metabolism through 2 distinct but complementary mechanisms. First, they can slow the digestion and absorption of carbohydrates, leading to smaller blood sugar spikes after meals. Second, ginger compounds appear to improve insulin sensitivity and support better glucose uptake into cells. So, ginger is helping your body handle carbs more gently while making the insulin you have work more effectively, all from one root that grows in the ground. A published meta-analysis examining multiple randomized clinical trials, specifically looking at ginger and blood sugar, found that consistent ginger consumption reduced fasting blood sugar by an average of 10 or 20 mmol and showed improvements in HbA1c. The effective dose in these trials was as little as 1 to 3 g per day, which is less than 2 tsp of ground ginger. That is not a dramatic amount. That is a pinch you can add to your morning oatmeal or your evening soup without even thinking about it. Meet Dorothy. Dorothy was 71 years old. She was a retired school teacher from Charleston, South Carolina, where she had taught 5th grade for 34 years. She came to me with fasting blood sugar consistently in the 150-160 range. She was not on medication yet, but she was on the edge. She also had some joint discomfort and had been managing that with over-the-counter medications. We addressed both problems simultaneously. For her daily routine, we incorporated ginger into her diet. Fresh ginger in her tea every morning, ground ginger in her cooking in the evenings. Ginger is also a well-validated natural anti-inflammatory. Over the course of 8 weeks, Dorothy gradually saw her fasting blood sugar move downward. At her next checkup, she was reading around 132-138. 2 problems, 1 kitchen ingredient. I cannot always promise that kind of outcome, but when it happens, it is hard not to find it genuinely remarkable. Spice 3, garlic. Now, let's talk about a spice that most people over 60 have used for flavor, but may not realize has direct effects on blood sugar regulation. Garlic. The primary bioactive compounds, especially when garlic is crushed or chopped, help support better insulin sensitivity and can modestly lower fasting glucose levels. Research also indicates that garlic phytochemicals can reduce oxidative stress that contributes to insulin resistance over time. A review of clinical studies found that consistent garlic consumption reduced fasting blood sugar by an average of about 10-15 ml or more DL in people with elevated levels. And this is not garlic extract in a lab. This is garlic consumed the way you would consume it in your kitchen as fresh cloves added to real food. Let me tell you about Frank. Frank was 68 years old. He was a retired postal worker from Minneapolis, Minnesota. He had worked his mail route for over 30 years on foot through Minneapolis winters that most people in the country can barely imagine. And he was honestly one of the most physically active patients over 65 that I had ever evaluated. He walked, he gardened, he was not overweight, he did not drink, he did not smoke, and yet his fasting blood sugar was running high at 152/158. Frank's case reminded me of something I encounter more often than people might expect. Patients who do everything right by the conventional checklist and still can't get the numbers where they need to be. When I reviewed Frank's diet in detail, the picture clarified quickly. He was eating well, but he was eating a narrow, repetitive selection of foods that happened to be low in the specific bioactive compounds his body needed for glucose control. I introduced Frank to fresh garlic as a daily addition. 3 to 4 cloves, crushed or finely chopped, added to his meals. Frank maintained this single addition consistently for 9 weeks. His fasting blood sugar came down noticeably. That is the kind of result that makes the simplicity of this approach feel almost unfair in the best possible way. Spice 4, turmeric. If you have been paying any attention to health conversations over the past decade, you have almost certainly heard about turmeric. It has had a cultural moment. It is in lattes, in supplements, in face creams, in everything. And I will be honest with you, much of what gets said about turmeric in popular media is overstated, oversimplified, or attached to claims that go well beyond what the actual research supports. But here is what the research genuinely does show specifically for blood sugar and snorts. It is worth understanding clearly. The primary bioactive compound in turmeric is curcumin. Curcumin works on your blood sugar through a mechanism that is distinct from everything else I've described so far, one that is increasingly understood to be central to why so many seniors develop progressively worsening insulin resistance as they age. Curcumin supports healthier endothelial function and reduces low-grade inflammation that drives insulin resistance. It also helps improve insulin signaling pathways over time. Research, including studies lasting 8 to 12 weeks or longer, has shown meaningful improvements in fasting blood sugar and HbA1c with consistent use. The mechanism is slower and more cumulative. It works by gradually supporting metabolic health over time, not by providing an immediate signal. This means patience matters with turmeric. It is not the spice you take on Monday and see results by Friday. It is the spice that, when used consistently over months, begins to support the metabolic processes that aging steadily challenges year after year after year. One critical note that I tell every patient about turmeric. Curcumin is poorly absorbed by the body on its own. It needs a bioenhancer. Black pepper, and specifically a compound called piperine, increases curcumin absorption dramatically. Always pair your turmeric with black pepper. Consider Gloria. Gloria was 66 years old. She was a retired hospital administrator from Richmond, Virginia. She was what I would call a sophisticated health consumer. She read widely. She asked good questions. She had tried a variety of approaches to managing her blood sugar, which sat consistently around 148/155 fasting. We added a teaspoon of ground turmeric with a pinch of black pepper to her evening cooking every single day into soups, roasted vegetables, scrambled eggs, rice dishes. It became part of the background flavor of her cooking. At the 4-month mark, her fasting blood sugar had moved to around 132/138. Gradual, consistent. The snorts way metabolic improvement actually works. Spice 5, cayenne pepper. Here is a spice that tends to provoke one of 2 reactions in people I discuss it with. Either they love it and use it constantly, or they look at me with the expression of someone who has never willingly put anything hot in their mouth and has absolutely no intention of starting. Now I want to speak directly to both groups because what cayenne pepper does inside your metabolic system is genuinely worth understanding regardless of where you currently sit on the spice heat spectrum. The active compound in cayenne pepper is capsaicin. Capsaicin can activate receptors that influence energy metabolism and support better insulin sensitivity in some studies. It may also help with modest improvements in glucose handling. Start small and honor what your body tells you. Cayenne can irritate the gastrointestinal lining in people with certain conditions like gastritis or reflux at higher quantities. And finally, cardamom and hibiscus round out the list with supportive evidence for better glucose regulation and antioxidant protection that helps combat the oxidative stress linked to higher blood sugar. None of this replaces the conversation with your doctor. None of it is a substitute for the medical care you are receiving, but all of it is available to you today, right now, in a store near your home at prices that do not require a prescription, a COA, or a prior authorization from an insurance company. Start with one, just one. Pick the one that felt most compelling to you today, the one whose story resonated, the one whose taste you already enjoy. Add it consistently for 4 to 6 weeks. Watch your home blood sugar readings or lab numbers. Let your body tell you what it thinks and come back to this channel because there is so much more to learn. If this video helped you understand something that the medical conversation around you has not been taking the time to explain, and I genuinely believe it did, then please subscribe right now and share it with someone you love who is still searching for answers. They may be closer to those answers than they realize. I'll see you in the next video. Take good care of yourself.